From the get-go, let me tell you, life with Tom had become like those old vinyl records, the same tunes spinning in circles, only the scratches getting more noticeable. That's where I was, stuck in a loop of monotony and predictability. But then, Michael happened. It was at this bland corporate retreat, where the most exciting event was supposed to be the keynote on fiscal responsibility. Michael, with his quick wit and that devil-may-care smile, was like a gust of fresh air in a stuffy room. I found myself drawn to him, a feeling I hadn't experienced in God knows how long. Our first real conversation wasn't planned. We both had escaped the death by PowerPoint for a quick coffee. But one coffee turned into two, then dinner, and before I knew it, we were the last two left in the hotel lounge. Michael shared stories about his travels, his dreams of writing a novel, and his passion for photography. It was intoxicating. I found myself sharing my own dreams, ones I'd shelved away so deep I almost forgot they were there. The connection was undeniable, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. The affair began not with a grand gesture, but with a kiss that caught me off guard. It was after a team dinner, outside the restaurant under the dim glow of the street lamps. It was impulsive, unexpected, and it shattered the last of my resistance. That kiss woke something in me I thought had died long ago, a desire, a longing for something more than the scripted life I was living. The thrill of sneaking around was undeniable. I started crafting elaborate lies to cover my late nights and long lunches. Working late on the Henderson project, I text Tom, feeling a mix of guilt and excitement. The lies came easier than I expected, each one a thread in the web I was weaving. Michael and I would meet in hidden corners of the city, our little bubble untouched by the realities of our outside lives. Balancing my time between Tom and Michael became a meticulous operation. I kept a mental calendar, color-coded and locked away in my mind, ensuring never to mix the two. With Tom, I was the wife he knew, maintaining the facade of normalcy. With Michael, I was someone else entirely, adventurous, spontaneous, free. The secrecy of our affair added to its intensity, every stolen moment feeling like a precious secret just between the two of us. Our weekend getaway was a turning point. Away from the prying eyes of the world, we indulged in our affair openly. Those 2 days were a blur of laughter, passion, and a level of intimacy I hadn't experienced in years. Lying in Michael's arms, watching the sunrise, I felt a pang of sadness for the life I was missing, the life I could have had if things were different. Comparing Michael to Tom became a dangerous game. With Michael, every day was an adventure, every conversation a journey. With Tom, conversations had become transactional, our interactions a checklist of marital duties. In my mind, I justified my actions by magnifying every flaw in my marriage, every missed connection, every unmet need. Michael was the answer to a question I hadn't dared to ask myself. What if there's more to life than this? This chapter of my life, this secret chapter, was written in the shadows, a story of longing, betrayal, and a quest for something that might have always been a mirage. But in those moments, caught in the whirlwind of passion and secrecy, I convinced myself it was worth the risk, worth the inevitable fallout. Little did I know, the cost of this affair would be higher than I could have ever imagined. The day I bought a second phone just to talk to Michael, I knew I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Hiding it felt like I was part of some spy movie, except the thrill was tinged with a guilt I shoved deep down. It's just a phone, I told myself, ignoring the screaming conscience in my head. It was our secret line, a direct connection to our hidden world, and every beep from it sent a mix of excitement and anxiety through me. Michael's gifts started arriving soon after. Little things at first, a book I mentioned wanting to read, a scarf in my favorite color, then more personal items, jewelry that I couldn't possibly explain away. I became a master at inventing stories, telling Tom they were just rewards I'd bought myself for enduring another mind-numbing day at the office. But every lie, every hidden box felt like a brick added to the barrier between Tom and me. Guilt was a constant shadow, trailing me with every step, every lie. But whenever it threatened to overwhelm me, I'd think of Michael and the happiness he brought into my life. I deserve this, became my mantra, a weak defense against the growing turmoil inside me. Then came Michael's proposition. A holiday abroad, just the two of us. The idea was reckless, daring, and utterly irresistible. Planning it was like sketching out a dream. We chose a secluded beach resort far from anyone who might recognize us. The anticipation was intoxicating. I imagined us together without the need for secrets, openly showing the world we were a couple. That dream was a balm, soothing the part of me scared of what we were doing. Our week at the resort was like living in a bubble. The outside world, with its judgments and consequences, faded away. We were just two people madly in love, basking in the warmth of the sun and each other. It was a glimpse of a life I yearned for, one filled with love, passion, and freedom. For a fleeting moment, I believed it was possible to have that life, to leave behind the lies and the double life. But reality has a way of crashing down hard. Coming back home was like walking from a sunlit paradise into a cold, shadowed room. Tom, with his familiar routines and expectations, seemed like a stranger. The distance between us had grown into a chasm, filled with unsaid words and unshared experiences. I found myself withdrawing, unable to bridge that gap, my heart still lingering in that sun-drenched resort. The contrast between my life with Tom and the one I'd tasted with Michael was stark. With Michael, I felt alive, seen, and cherished. With Tom, I felt like I was playing a role, one that no longer fit. The guilt, the lies, and the double life weighed on me. But the thought of giving up the happiness I found with Michael was unbearable. In that tangled web of emotions and desires, I realized I was at a crossroads. Continuing down this path with Michael meant more lies, more secrets, and the potential to hurt Tom even more than I already had. But the thought of ending things with Michael, of going back to the way things were before, filled me with a deep, aching sadness. This chapter of my life, a chapter filled with clandestine meetings, secret communications, and the intoxicating rush of forbidden love, was also one of the most conflicted times I've ever faced. It was a chapter where every action, every decision, felt like it was pulling me further away from the person I once was, leading me into uncharted territories of the heart and morality. The moment I started daydreaming about a life with Michael, with us free to be together without sneaking around, was the moment I realized how far I drifted from my marriage. It wasn't just a fling anymore. I was envisioning a future, our future, filled with the love and excitement I craved. It felt like waking up from a long, dull dream to a reality brimming with color and possibility. As these fantasies took root, I found myself pulling away from my life with Tom, the life we'd built together over the years. It was like I was there, but not really. I'd nod along to plans and conversations, but my mind was miles away, wrapped up in thoughts of Michael and the what-ifs. My heart wasn't in my marriage anymore. It was with Michael, making every excuse to see him, to talk to him. Waiting for Tom to leave for work became the most anxious part of my day, not because I dreaded being alone, but because I couldn't wait to pick up my phone and dive into another conversation with Michael. Our chats weren't just talks anymore. They were lifelines, pulling me further away from my old self and deeper into this affair. Each "good morning" from him was like a promise of something more, something better. Then came the close call. A friend from work spotted us together one afternoon. The sheer panic I felt when I saw the recognition in her eyes was a jolt back to reality. We managed to laugh it off as an impromptu work meeting, but the thrill of almost being caught was a wake-up call. It was dangerous. This game we were playing, yet part of me relished the risk. It made everything feel more intense, more real. Arguments with Tom became more frequent. Our conversations laced with an undercurrent of frustration and unsaid words. One night, it all came to a head. "We're drifting apart," he said, the hurt evident in his voice. It was during one of these arguments that I realized the painful truth. I was falling out of love with him. I felt trapped in a life I no longer wanted. A life that felt more like a duty than a choice. The decision to leave Tom for Michael wasn't made in a moment of passion, but in a quiet realization that I couldn't go back to pretending. I needed to be honest, with Tom and myself. Planning to tell him about the affair was the hardest decision I'd ever made. I rehearsed the conversation in my head a million times, each scenario ending differently, but nothing could have prepared me for his reaction. When I finally gathered the courage to talk, His response floored me. "I know there's someone else," he said, the accusation clear in his eyes. He'd seen the signs, the late nights, the distracted glances, the unexplained absences. I was taken aback by his suspicion, his insight into changes I thought I'd hidden so well. That conversation was a turning point. It shattered any illusions I had about a clean break or an understanding parting. Tom's suspicion, his hurt, it all made the situation painfully real. I was not just leaving a marriage. I was tearing apart a life we built together, brick by brick. The realization of what I was about to do, the enormity of it all, weighed heavily on me. Yet, despite the guilt and the fear, a part of me knew there was no going back. I was stepping into unknown territory, driven by a love that felt right, despite the wrongs it entailed. The moment Tom accused me of having an affair, my world tilted. Denial was my first instinct. "You're wrong, Tom. There's no one else," I lied, with a conviction I didn't feel. Guilt gnawed at me, but so did a defiant urge to protect the bubble Michael and I had created. Yet, Tom's piercing gaze, filled with a mix of hurt and suspicion, planted a seed of doubt. Was I making the right decision? As days passed, Tom grew more distant, his warmth replaced by a cold, detached demeanor that felt like a slap. I heard him on the phone one night, his voice low, discussing surveillance and evidence. The words, "private investigator," hit me like a ton of bricks. My secret world wasn't so secret after all. The realization that Tom went to such lengths shattered any hope of an amicable resolution. Our marriage was beyond salvaging. I made the hardest decision of my life. Sitting across from Tom at the kitchen table, where we'd shared countless meals and laughter, I confessed everything. "I'm in love with someone else, Tom. I'm so sorry," I blurted out, the words tasting like ash. His reaction was heart-wrenching. Devastation washed over his face, quickly turning into bitterness and resentment. "I want a divorce," I whispered, the finality of those words closing the chapter on our life together. Moving in with Michael was a whirlwind. I was elated, thinking I'd finally found my path to happiness. But the novelty soon wore off, revealing cracks in the facade. Michael began spending more time away, returning late with little more than vague excuses. "Just out with the guys," he'd say, or "work ran late." But the frequency of these nights and the shadow of evasion in his eyes sowed seeds of doubt in my heart. Then I found the messages. Michael's phone, left carelessly on the counter, buzzed with texts from other women. Confronting him was like stepping into a nightmare. "What is this, Michael?" My voice trembled, holding his phone out like a verdict. His confession was a gut punch. "I'm not ready to settle down," he admitted, his voice devoid of the warmth I'd fallen for. "I love you, but I need my freedom." The words were a cold shower, dousing the fiery passion that had driven me into his arms. In that moment, the enormity of my choices crashed down on me. I'd left a marriage, hurt someone I once loved deeply, for a mirage of happiness that evaporated the moment reality set in. Michael's admission of wanting his freedom, even as he professed to love me, was a bitter pill. It made me question everything I'd done, everything I'd sacrificed for this illusion of love and happiness. The realization that I traded a life of stability for a fleeting fantasy was devastating. I'd been so sure of what my heart wanted, so convinced that Michael was the key to my happiness. But standing there, facing the truth of his inability to commit, I felt more lost and alone than ever. The journey that had started with a longing for passion and excitement had led me to a place of uncertainty and regret, a stark reminder of the price of chasing desires without considering the consequences. There I was, standing at the edge of a cliff I'd walked off myself, staring into the abyss of my own making. The realization hit me like a freight train. Michael was never going to be the man I needed him to be. The commitment, the love, the future I'd envisioned. It was all a mirage, leaving me stranded in a desert of regret and loneliness. With nowhere left to turn, I did the only thing I could think of. I reached out to Tom, my ex-husband. Dialing his number felt like trying to turn back the clock with my bare hands. "Tom, it's me," I began, my voice shaking. I made a huge mistake. Can we meet?" To my surprise, he agreed. Sitting across from Tom at our old favorite coffee shop, the memories came flooding back. I apologized, my words tumbling out in a torrent of regret. I'm so sorry, Tom. I was wrong. So incredibly wrong. Is there any chance? I couldn't even finish the sentence, hope and fear warring inside me. Tom looked at me, his eyes reflecting a pain I'd caused, a wound I'd inflicted. I've been seeing someone, he said, the words landing like a punch to the gut. She appreciates me, for who I am. The finality in his voice, the unspoken understanding that what we had was truly over, shattered any illusions of reconciliation. I forgive you, Tom continued, his voice softening, but I can't forget. I've moved on. His words were kind, but they closed the door on the past, leaving me to face the reality of my choices. The aftermath was a struggle. I tried to pick up the pieces of my life, reaching out to friends and family, only to realize the extent of the damage I'd done. Conversations were strained, the undercurrent of judgment unmistakable. I was the architect of my own ruin, and the path to rebuilding was steeper and more treacherous than I'd ever imagined. Every attempt to reconnect felt like running into a wall of my own making. Friends I'd neglected for the sake of a love that turned out to be fleeting were polite but distant. My family, though supportive, couldn't hide their disappointment. The loneliness was a constant companion, a reminder of the price of my actions. Navigating through the wreckage, I understood that the journey back to myself wouldn't be easy or quick. The guilt, the regret, it all weighed heavily on me, a daily reminder of the cost of chasing what I thought was happiness. The road ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. I had to face the consequences of my choices, rebuild the bridges I'd burned, and find a way to forgive myself. After months of wrestling with regret and loneliness, I realized I couldn't navigate the aftermath of my choices alone. Seeking professional help felt like a defeat at first, but it became my lifeline. Sitting in that therapist's office, I poured out the mess of my life, the guilt, the sorrow, and the longing for a path to redemption. You need to forgive yourself, she said, a simple statement that felt like scaling a mountain. I found a support group next, a circle of strangers tied together by the thread of heartache and wrong turns. Sharing my story, hearing theirs, it was a balm to the soul. In their voices, I heard my pain, my mistakes, and gradually, I started to see the possibility of healing. We're all just walking each other home, someone said in one of the sessions, and those words stuck with me, a mantra in my journey back to some semblance of peace. Starting anew wasn't just about emotional healing. It was about building a new life from the rubble of the old one. I landed a job, a fresh start in a new company where my past wasn't a shadow hanging over me. But escaping the shadow of past decisions isn't as simple as changing locations or jobs. It clung to me, a reminder of the cost of my choices, evident in the cautious welcome of new colleagues, the whispers I imagined, or didn't, in corners. Then came the news that knocked the wind out of me. Tom was engaged. Hearing it from mutual friends felt like reopening a wound I thought was healing. The finality of it, the stark realization that life moved on, that he had moved on, was a pain sharper than I anticipated. It cemented the loss, the end of what was once us. In the quiet that followed, I reflected on my journey. The clarity of hindsight revealed the gravity of my mistakes, the ripples of pain I caused. It was a heavy burden, understanding the depth of hurt inflicted not just on Tom, but on everyone caught in the aftermath of my decisions. It prompted me to write a letter to Tom, not to seek forgiveness but to offer it, to express my sincerest apologies and wish him all the happiness he found. Sending that letter was like setting a piece of my heart adrift, a final step in letting go. Volunteering at the community center became my next step forward. It was there, among people who needed help, that I found a sense of purpose that had eluded me for so long. Helping others, making a tangible difference in their lives, I began to rebuild my sense of self-worth, piece by painstaking piece. It was in giving that I received the strength to forgive myself, to accept my past, and to embrace a future where my mistakes didn't define me. Each step, each action from seeking help, joining a support group, starting anew at work, to volunteering, was a brick in the foundation of my new life. A life where the lessons of the past shaped a future of hope, of contribution, and of self-forgiveness. It was a journey of coming home to myself, of learning that while I couldn't change the past, I had the power to shape my path forward. One step, one decision, one act of kindness at a time. Life, as they say, goes on, even when you're not sure how to take the next step. That's where I found myself, in the middle of a whirlwind of change, trying to piece together a new normal from the fragments of my old life. It started with the small, almost inconsequential decision to volunteer at the local community center. Just to keep busy, I told myself, but it turned into so much more. At the center, I met people from all walks of life, each with their own stories of struggle and resilience. It was there, among the clutter of donated clothes and the smell of brewed coffee, that I began to feel a sense of belonging again. Conversations weren't just exchanges of pleasantries, they were lifelines thrown across the chasm of loneliness. Slowly, friendships began to form, offering me a glimpse of hope, a reminder that acceptance and understanding weren't as far off as I'd feared. Then came Bella, a scrappy little terrier with more energy than sense. Adopting her was a spur-of-the-moment decision, one of those rare, impulsive acts that felt right. Bella needed a home, and I needed a companion who asked for nothing more than walks and affection. In her eyes, I found unconditional love and a reason to smile, even on the days when my heart felt the heaviest. With Bella's arrival, a new rhythm took hold of my life. We explored parks and trails, each walk helping to clear the clutter of regret and what-ifs from my mind. It was during these long walks that I found myself drawn to new hobbies and interests. Photography, something I'd always thought of trying, became a passion. The world through the lens was both vast and intimate, and capturing moments of beauty in the mundane became a balm for my soul. Selling the gifts from Michael wasn't easy. Each item held memories, some sweet, most bitter. But as I packed them away, I realized it was time to let go, to use the past as a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block. The money from the sale funded a trip abroad, a solo journey that was as much about finding closure as it was about seeking new experiences. Traveling alone was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I met people, shared stories, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a connection to the world around me. One encounter stood out, a woman whose tale of loss and redemption echoed my own. Her words, filled with strength and sorrow, were a reminder that while the past shapes us, it doesn't have to define us. Returning home, I was not the same woman who had left. The trip had given me perspective, a clearer view of who I was and who I wanted to be. It taught me about resilience, about the power of forgiveness of others, but most importantly, of myself. Standing on a beach at sunset, the final rays of the day casting long shadows on the sand, I realized that life is a tapestry of choices, each thread intertwined with others, forming a picture we can't always predict or understand. The beauty lies not in the perfection of the design, but in the complexity of its patterns. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I made a promise to myself to live authentically, to embrace the lessons learned from love and loss, and to move forward with compassion and hope. The journey hadn't been easy, and the road ahead was still uncertain. But in that moment, with the imagine waking up to the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee, the kind that promises a day full of possibilities. That's my morning ritual, courtesy of Alex, my hubby. He's the kind of guy who remembers the little things, like how I take my coffee with just a hint of cream, no sugar. Our Chicago apartment buzzes with the energy of the day ahead as we share quick pecks and talk about what's waiting for us downtown. It's the kind of routine you read about in romance novels, except it's real, and it's mine. Fast forward to our 5th anniversary, Alex pulls off the ultimate surprise. Dinner at the cozy little Italian place where it all began. I mean, this guy remembers everything. Right down to the table we sat at when I nearly spilled my wine, trying to play it cool. The evening was a montage of our best moments, each course bringing back memories, each conversation a reminder of why I fell for him. It was perfect, the kind of night that makes you believe in forever. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs. Enter my new job at a buzzing publishing house. That's where I met David. Picture this. Tall, charming, with a passion for the classics that matches mine. Working late one night, we got lost in a conversation about Hemingway and Fitzgerald, and I caught myself laughing in a way I hadn't in years. It was electric, a spark I didn't even realize was missing. Weeks turned into months, and the once exhilarating chats with Alex began to feel more like a checklist of daily updates. Meanwhile, David seemed to occupy my thoughts more and more. It was confusing, this shift in dynamics, feeling pulled towards someone who wasn't my husband. I remember the night I spilled my guts to Lisa, my go-to for all things life. Over too much wine. I confessed how I felt alive around David, how he made me question what I wanted. Lisa's look said it all: concern, shock, a touch of, "I told you so." She warned me about the dangers of mistaking excitement for something deeper. But the heart wants what it wants, right? Then, David did something that tipped the scales. He gifted me a first edition of The Great Gatsby, my literary kryptonite. It wasn't just a book. It was a message, a connection that went beyond casual work banter. That gift made me question everything: my marriage, my choices, my future. So here I am, caught in the middle of a life I thought I wanted and a passion I never saw coming. Every morning with Alex, every secret thought of David. It's like walking a tightrope between contentment and desire. And let me tell you, balancing isn't exactly my forte. Ever feel like you're sprinting down a path, part racing, knowing you should stop but the thrill keeps you going? That's me, caught in a whirlwind I never saw coming. Alex, my rock, started sensing the shift. The way I'd linger a bit too long on my phone. The laughs that didn't reach my eyes anymore. He tried, bless him. One Friday, he comes home with this look, all hopeful, and says, "Pack a bag, babe. We're ditching the city for the weekend." A getaway to reignite whatever spark he thought we were losing. But my mind, it was miles away, tangled up with thoughts of David, his smile, our last conversation. Then came the company bash. David was there, magnetic as ever. One moment we're laughing over drinks, the next, our goodbyes blurred into a kiss that shouldn't have happened. It felt like fireworks and regrets, all at once. Walking away from him, I was a mess of exhilaration and guilt, a cocktail that left me dizzy. Alex's suspicion hit like a cold shower. "Who's David?" he asked, holding my phone one morning, a message from David lighting up the screen. I could hear the worry in his voice, a thread pulling at the fabric of our life together. "Oh, he's just a colleague. We're working on a project together," I lied, hating how easily it came out. That lie, it was the match that lit the fuse. Our home turned into a battleground. Harsh words and cold shoulders replacing the warmth we once lived in. Alex's eyes, once full of love, now questioned every move I made. "Despite Lisa's warnings, you're playing with fire," she said. I kept meeting David, sneaking around like a teenager. Each secret rendezvous added another layer to the web I was weaving. A dangerous game that promised nothing but heartache. But did I listen? No. I was too caught up in the rush, the forbidden excitement that came with every stolen moment. Each lie, each secret meeting, was a step further away from the life I had built with Alex. And deep down, I knew I was walking a tightrope with no safety net below. Alex, in a last-ditch effort to pull us back from the edge, books us counseling sessions. "Let's try to fix this together," he said, hope flickering in his eyes. I nodded, but my mind was a million miles away, tangled up in what was becoming my own secret adventure with David. My trysts with David grew bolder, intoxicating. We'd meet up in broad daylight, laughing and chatting at cafes as if we were the only two people in the world. It was reckless, a game of thrill that I couldn't stop playing. The danger of getting caught only added to the allure. A fire that kept burning brighter with every stolen moment. But, like all poorly kept secrets, ours was bound to come out. And it did, spectacularly so. Alex walked into the very cafe where David and I were lost in our little bubble. The look on Alex's face, a mix of hurt, disbelief, and anger, is something I'll never forget. The cafe went silent, all eyes on us as Alex confronted me, his voice cracking. "Is this why? Him?" There was no escaping the truth. With the world watching, I confessed, the words pouring out in a flood of guilt and shame. "Yes, it's him. I'm sorry, Alex. The words felt hollow, doing nothing to ease the pain in Alex's eyes. Our marriage, once my anchor, was now in ruins, shattered by my actions. Alex left, the door closing behind him with a finality that echoed in the empty space. Alone, I tried to convince myself that pursuing my feelings for David was the right choice, that happiness was worth the chaos. But deep down, a nagging voice whispered doubts, my heart heavy with the weight of what I had done. Then came the cold splash of reality. David, the man I risked everything for, casually mentioned he wasn't looking for anything serious. We're just having fun, right? He said, his words slicing through me. Fun. That's all it was to him. My world, once filled with the promise of new love, crumbled around me, leaving me to face the wreckage of my life alone. In the quiet that followed, I was left to pick up the pieces, each one a sharp reminder of the cost of following a heart that didn't know where it truly belonged. The regret was overwhelming, a bitter pill that I had no choice but to swallow, as I realized the enormity of what I had lost. In the aftermath of a storm, there's always that eerie silence, a calm that feels almost mocking. That's where I found myself, in the quiet ruins of my life, grappling with the choices that led me here. I reached out to Alex, clinging to a sliver of hope that we could mend what I had broken. But our home was empty, his absence a loud echo of my worst fears realized. I called, texted, even showed up at his office, only to be met by his friend Mark, who looked at me with a mix of pity and disdain. He's filed for divorce, Mark said, his words a punch to the gut. Alex doesn't want to see you. Just like that, any hope of reconciliation evaporated, leaving me to face the magnitude of my mistakes alone. The fallout was swift and merciless. Friends we once shared sided with Alex, their cold shoulders and whispered conversations painting me as the villain. I was the talk of the town, the woman who threw away a good man for a fleeting thrill. The isolation was suffocating, a constant reminder of the price of my betrayal. Work became a battlefield. Whispers followed me down hallways, judgment in every glance. My relationship with colleagues, once warm and collaborative, turned frosty. The professional respect I had worked hard to build crumbling under the weight of scandal. My affair, once a secret, was now a stain on my reputation, a shadow I couldn't escape. Financially, the ground beneath me was crumbling. Alex's income, a foundation of our shared life, was gone. Bills piled up, the mortgage became a mountain I couldn't climb. Each overdue notice a reminder of the security I had gambled away. The reality of my impulsive decisions stared back at me, a future filled with uncertainty and struggle. The loneliness was crushing, nights stretched on endlessly, my only company the ghost of my former life. I fell into a depression, a dark hole where regret and sorrow consumed me. The love I had forsaken, the stability I had shattered, it all weighed heavily, a burden of guilt I carried in the silence of our empty home. Then, one day, scrolling through social media, I saw Alex. There he was, smiling, a light in his eyes that had been missing for so long. He was in a new city, surrounded by new people, a fresh start miles away from the wreckage I had caused. The sight of him, looking happier and at peace without me, was both a relief and a torment. He had moved on, found a way to heal from the scars I had inflicted, while I remained trapped in the aftermath of my decisions. In that moment, I realized the full extent of what I had lost. Not just a husband, but a friend, a partner, a piece of myself. The path to forgiveness, to redemption, seemed insurmountable, a journey I would have to undertake alone. As the reality of my new beginning dawned, so did the understanding that some mistakes are irrevocable. Their consequence is a shadow that lingers long after the storm has passed. The day the divorce papers landed on my doorstep felt like a cold slap of reality. There it was, in black and white, the official end to what was once a love story. Alex and I, we were over, and no amount of wishing or regret could change that. I never imagined this would be us when we said, I do. The weight of it all hit me like a ton of bricks, each word on those pages a reminder of my own undoing. I needed a friend, someone who knew me inside and out. Naturally, I thought of Lisa, but when I reached out, hoping for a bit of comfort, or maybe even a shoulder to cry on. I was met with a coldness I hadn't expected. "I can't believe you did this," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. It was clear the damage was done, not just with Alex, but with those closest to me. Lisa, my confidant through thick and thin, had pulled away, another casualty of my choices. Alone, with too much time to think, self-reflection wasn't just an option, it was all I had. The silence of the apartment was deafening. Each day a confrontation with the truth. My quest for something more, something I thought was missing, had led me to this point. I had chased a fleeting feeling at the expense of a love that was steadfast and true. The realization was a bitter pill, and swallowing it didn't come easy. Work was no escape. David, the man who once ignited a spark in me, now couldn't even meet my eyes. Our interactions were awkward, strained, and eventually non-existent. My performance took a nosedive, and it wasn't long before my boss called me in. "We're going to have to demote you," he said, not unkindly, but the disappointment was clear. There I was, professional life in tatters, a stark reflection of the personal mess I'd made. With my finances in disarray, staying in our home wasn't an option. I found myself packing up memories into boxes, moving into a space that felt as cramped and confined as my current state of mind. Each box was a reminder of what I had lost, and the small, unfamiliar apartment was a daily testament to how far I had fallen. In a moment of desperation, I penned a letter to Alex. It was filled with apologies, acknowledgments of my mistakes, and pleas for forgiveness. I poured my heart out, hoping for some kind of closure, maybe even a sign that there was a part of him that could still forgive me. But the silence that followed was answer enough. No reply came, and with each passing day, the hope that he might reach out faded into nothingness. The divorce settlement was the final nail in the coffin. What I was left with barely covered the basics, a stark contrast to the comfortable life Alex and I once shared. It was a harsh reminder of the consequences of my actions, a life now defined by scarcity and struggle. The silence in my apartment was deafening, a stark contrast to the life I once knew. My phone, once buzzing with messages from friends, now lay silent, a constant reminder of the isolation I'd brought upon myself. The fallout from my actions was swift. One by one, friends took Alex's side, leaving me to navigate the aftermath of my decisions alone. Work was no refuge. Whispers of my personal turmoil had spread, and soon, talk of a restructuring began to surface. The writing was on the wall, my once secure position now hanging by a thread. It seemed my personal failures were bleeding into every aspect of my life, leaving no stone unturned. In the quiet of my apartment, the reality of what I'd done hit me hard. I missed Alex, not just the man, but the stability and love he represented. Our life together, once taken for granted, now felt like a distant memory, a reminder of what I'd squandered for a fleeting passion that left me with nothing but regret. The final blow came when I realized Alex had blocked me on all social media platforms. It was as if he'd erased me from his life, a clear sign he was moving on, without me. The finality of it all was crushing, a tangible sign that there was no going back, no chance for reconciliation. Amidst this turmoil, I received a professional award at work. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a cause for celebration, a moment of pride. But without Alex to share it with, it felt hollow, an empty achievement that underscored the loneliness of my new reality. Health issues soon followed, the stress and depression taking a toll on my body. Frequent illnesses became the norm, a physical manifestation of the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. It was as if my body was rebelling against the choices I'd made, a constant reminder of the chaos I'd invited into my life. In a bid to move on, I tried dating again. Each encounter was a stark reminder of what I'd lost. No one could fill the void left by Alex. Each date ended in disappointment, reinforcing the realization that I'd let go of something irreplaceable. The knock on the door was like a punch to the gut. The delivery man handing me a stack of legal papers with a detached efficiency. Bills, once easily managed between Alex and me, now loomed large, a stark reminder of the financial quagmire my life had become. Standing in the doorway, the papers felt like chains, binding me to a reality I could no longer escape from. a reality of my own making. Then came my birthday, a day that used to be filled with laughter, surprises, and warmth. This year, it was just me, in an apartment too quiet, surrounded by the ghosts of happier times. The silence was suffocating, each passing hour a heavy reminder of the void Alex's absence had left in my life. I blew out a solitary candle on a cupcake, wishing for a past that was irrevocably gone. In a masochistic twist of fate, I found a box of old photos during a desperate attempt to clutter my life. Pictures of Alex and me, smiling, carefree, in love. Each photo was a dagger. Memories of a life that felt like someone else's fairy tale. Tears blurred the images, the pain of loss mingling with a deep, unshakable longing for what had been. The universe, it seemed, wasn't done with me yet. The mutual friends event brought me face to face with Alex for the first time since our split. I had rehearsed what I would say, how I would act, but all of that fell away when I saw him. He looked through me, his gaze devoid of any recognition or warmth, as if I were a stranger. That look, that moment of absolute indifference, hurt more than any argument we'd ever had. It was then, watching him interact with others, laughing, alive in a way he hadn't been with me towards the end, that the final piece of denial crumbled. Alex had moved on, truly and completely. The realization was a cold wave, washing over me, leaving a numbness in its wake. I was stuck, anchored to my mistakes, while he had found a way to sail on. The days that followed were a blur, a downward spiral where each moment was a reminder of the enormity of what I had lost. My life, once so full of love and potential, was now a shadow, a collection of could-have-beens and should-have-dones. The culmination of this journey through hell came unexpectedly, on a rainy evening as I passed our old home. There, in the window, I saw a celebration, a gathering of friends and family. A mutual acquaintance, spotting me in the rain, approached with a hesitant step. "Did you hear? Alex is getting remarried," she said, her voice a mix of sympathy and discomfort. The words hit me like a physical blow, the finality of our goodbye crystallizing in that moment. The rain masked my tears, but nothing could hide the shattering of my heart. I had lost Alex, not just to circumstance or fate, but to another future, one where I had no place. That night, as the rain soaked through my clothes, I understood the true cost of my actions. The irrevocable goodbye wasn't just Alex's to me, but mine to the life we had shared, to the person I had been. In chasing a fleeting passion, I had thrown away something precious, something